The scent of jasmine was intoxicating as I stood in our garden, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the roses I was pruning. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt like it belonged to a different world from the one that would soon unfold. Robert's voice, full of excitement, broke through my calm, pulling me back to reality with an invitation that promised a night of laughter and perhaps a little too much fun. As I turned to see his eager face, I couldn't help but wonder what adventures awaited us, but as the evening progressed, the line between fun and something more began to blur, leaving me to question just how far we were willing to go. What was Robert's true intention behind this seemingly innocent gathering? The scent of jasmine filled the air as I stood in our garden, pruning the roses. My hands, weathered by time, moved with a practiced grace, snipping away at the dead blooms. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over our little piece of paradise. That's when Robert's voice broke through my reverie, his tone unusually animated. "Diane, you won't believe what I've got for us," he called out, his voice carrying the excitement of a child on Christmas morning. I turned to see him, his salt and pepper beard catching the last rays of sunlight, a broad grin spreading across his face. In his hand, he waved an invitation card like a flag of victory. I wiped my hands on my apron, curiosity piqued. "What's this about, Robert?" He approached, his eyes twinkling with the same mischief that had drawn me to him all those years ago. "It's an invitation for a get-together at the hotel suite," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just us and the gang, a night to let loose, maybe a bit too much." The idea was tempting, our friends, Mark with his infectious laugh, Susan with her quiet elegance, Tom with his sharp wit, and Linda, always the life of the party, would be there. It promised to be an evening of stories, laughter, and perhaps a few drinks too many. I smiled. The thought of escaping our routine, even for a night, was alluring. "Sounds like fun," I agreed, my mind already picturing the evening. "What could possibly go wrong in a room full of friends?" Robert's grin widened, and he wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. "You'll see. It'll be a night to remember," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. The suite was luxurious, with plush carpets that sank beneath my feet, and a panoramic view of the city skyline that stretched out like a canvas of twinkling lights. The atmosphere was warm, filled with the soft murmur of conversations and the clinking of glasses. Robert was in his element, greeting everyone with his usual charm. I mingled, catching up with Susan about her latest book club, while Robert and Tom discussed their recent golf outing. As the night progressed, the mood shifted subtly. Robert, with a mischievous grin, pulled me aside. "Diane, why don't you give Mark a hug?" he suggested, his voice playful, yet with an undertone I couldn't quite place. I laughed it off, thinking it was just his way of being jovial, but his insistence made me pause. Why was Robert pushing this so much? I glanced over at Mark, who was laughing at something Linda had said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He was always so warm, so inviting. But this suggestion from Robert felt out of place, like a note played off-key in an otherwise harmonious melody. I turned back to Robert, searching his face for any sign of what he was thinking. His eyes sparkled with mischief, but there was something else there, something I couldn't quite decipher. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I asked, my voice low, not wanting to draw attention. Robert's smile didn't waver, but he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Just a bit of fun, Diane. Let's make the night memorable." The room seemed to quiet down as Robert's suggestion hung in the air. Mark, looking slightly embarrassed, stood up, and I moved towards him, still unsure. As I embraced him, Robert's voice came again. "Now give him a kiss on the neck." The room's atmosphere thickened with an unspoken tension. I hesitated, my heart racing, but Robert's encouraging nod propelled me forward. The kiss was gentle, almost chaste, but the implications were anything but. Robert then turned to Mark. "Your turn." Mark, with a mix of confusion and compliance, approached me. His lips touched my neck, and I felt a shiver, not just from the contact, but from the surrealness of the situation. Robert watched, his expression unreadable, as I felt a line being crossed, not just by me, but by all of us in that room. What was Robert's game here? The air was thick with anticipation as Mark stepped back, his eyes searching mine for some sign of what this all meant. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks, a flush of embarrassment or excitement. I wasn't sure which. Robert's voice broke the silence. "See, isn't this fun?" His tone was light, but his eyes were sharp, observing every reaction. I glanced around the room, catching Susan's wide-eyed stare, Tom's smirk, and Linda's curious gaze. They were all part of this now, whether they wanted to be or not. The dynamic had shifted, and I felt like we were all players in a game orchestrated by Robert. Robert moved closer, his hand resting on my shoulder, his touch both comforting and commanding. "Let's keep the momentum going," he suggested, his voice low, almost a purr. "Diane, why don't you show Mark how much you appreciate him?" My mind raced. This was more than just playful antics. There was an edge to Robert's game, a challenge. I looked at Mark, his expression a mix of intrigue and apprehension. With a deep breath, I decided to play along, to see where this would lead, to understand the depth of Robert's intentions. I took Mark's hand, leading him to the center of the room. The soft music seemed to underscore every step, every breath, as the tension in the room grew palpable. Robert's friends, including Susan and Linda, watched with a mixture of shock and curiosity. Robert, with a calm demeanor, suggested we all sit down, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying a flicker of something else. He began to speak, explaining that he wanted to explore new dimensions in our relationship, to push boundaries in a controlled environment. "It's about trust," he said, looking at me with an intensity that made my stomach churn, "and about experiencing life in ways we've never dared before." His words hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in an invitation. The air was thick with anticipation and confusion. Robert's proposal was unlike anything we had ever discussed or even hinted at in our years together. He spoke of trust, of breaking free from the shackles of conventional relationships, of exploring desires that lay dormant beneath the surface of our daily lives. I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze upon me, waiting for my reaction. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear, curiosity, and a strange sense of excitement. Robert's eyes were locked on mine, searching for consent, for a sign that I was willing to step into this unknown territory with him. Would I agree to this bizarre proposal? The room seemed to hold its breath as I considered. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Here was Robert, the man I had shared my life with, suggesting we venture into a realm where the rules of our relationship could be rewritten. It was a test, not just of our love, but of our willingness to explore the depths of our desires. I looked around at our friends, their expressions a mix of intrigue and concern. Susan's eyes were wide, her usual composure replaced by a palpable tension. Linda, ever the adventurer, seemed almost eager, her curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. Tom, with his sharp wit, had a smirk that suggested he was enjoying the spectacle, while Mark, still standing beside me, looked both confused and captivated. Robert's hand tightened slightly on my shoulder, a silent encouragement. His touch was familiar yet charged. As Robert finished speaking, the room felt like it was holding its breath. I looked at him, then at Mark, whose face was a canvas of mixed emotions. The decision was mine, and in that moment I felt the weight of our marriage, our history, and the unknown future pressing down on me. With a nod, I agreed, and the night unfolded in ways I could never have imagined. Mark and I, under Robert's watchful eye, explored this new territory. It was a dance of consent, confusion, and a strange kind of liberation. The act was not just physical, but emotional, a crossing of lines that felt both forbidden and freeing. Robert's voice was a gentle guide, encouraging us to let go of our inhibitions. "Diane, show him how much you appreciate him," he whispered, his tone both soft and commanding. I took Mark's hand, leading him to the center of the room where the soft music played, setting a rhythm to our steps. The air was thick with anticipation as I leaned in, my lips brushing against Mark's, in a kiss that was both tender and charged with an electric tension. Robert's eyes were on us, his expression unreadable, yet I could sense his approval, his fascination with the unfolding scene. Mark's hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and I felt the warmth of his body against mine. It was a moment of surrender, of giving in to the curiosity that had been sparked by Robert's game. The room around us seemed to fade, leaving just the three of us in a bubble of exploration. Robert's voice broke through the haze. "Now, Mark, show Diane the same." His words were like a cue, and Mark responded, his lips finding the sensitive skin of my neck, sending shivers down my spine. The sensation was overwhelming, a mix of excitement and a strange, thrilling fear. The boundaries of our friendship, of our marriage, were being tested, stretched in ways that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Robert watched, his gaze intense, as if he was not just an observer but a conductor of this intimate symphony. As the night wore on, the exploration continued, each touch, each whispered word, adding layers to the morning after, was quiet, the sweet now a stark contrast to the night before. Robert and I sat on the edge of the bed, the city waking up outside. We talked, really talked, about what had happened, about trust, about love, and about the boundaries we had just redefined. It wasn't about infidelity in the traditional sense. It was about exploring the depths of our relationship, testing its strength, and perhaps, in a way, strengthening it. We agreed to keep this experience as a singular event, a moment of exploration that would remain between us, a secret pact sealed with new understanding. As we left the hotel hand in hand, I realized that sometimes, to truly understand the strength of a bond, you must dare to test its limits. The air was crisp, the city alive with the hustle of morning commuters, and yet our world felt different, quieter, as if we were walking through a bubble of our own making. Would our marriage ever be the same? The question lingered in my mind as we walked. The night had been a whirlwind of emotions, a dance of consent and curiosity, where boundaries were not just pushed, but redefined. Robert's hand in mine felt both familiar and new, as if we were rediscovering each other through the lens of last night's revelations. We stopped at a small cafe, the kind where the coffee is strong and the pastries are fresh. Over our cups we dissected the evening, not just the physicality of what had occurred, but the emotional undercurrents that had driven us to this point. Robert spoke of his desire to break free from the monotony, to feel alive in ways that our routine life couldn't provide. His words were earnest, his eyes searching mine for understanding. I listened, feeling the weight of his confessions, the vulnerability in his voice. It was clear that this wasn't just about a fleeting thrill. It was about exploring the depths of our connection, about trusting each other enough to venture into uncharted territories. The conversation shifted to trust, the cornerstone of our relationship. We talked about how trust isn't just about fidelity, but about being open to each other's needs and desires, even when they challenge our comfort. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.